What is up, everyone? I'm back. It's your boy Brandon Tanguma with another AEW solo pay-per-view recap. We're here to discuss AEW Redemption, the pay-per-view 1 month before AEW's biggest show of the year, All In. This one took place in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, from the Bell Center. No official word on the attendance, at least on the Wikipedia, quite yet. Could have checked out WrestleTix, but I did not. It looked fine. It's a major NHL-sized arena. They probably, didn't sell out the hard camera side, but everything, at least on the lower bowl, opposite the hard cam, looked good. Crowd was, I would say, solid. Nothing like too crazy for an AEW pay-per-view or, your typical kind of Bizarro World Canada crowd. So, I would say this was just an average AEW kind of crowd for the pay-per-views, but let's just jump on into it. It did start an hour early overall. Started at 7 o'clock East Coast time, 4 o'clock West Coast time here in the Bay. You would think that means it's going to end earlier, but it didn't really. I think it ended around 9 o'clock, so maybe a little bit, a skosh earlier compared to what Forbidden Door did last month, but this was still a 4+ hour show on a card that I to be honest, don't think it deserved. This was, a new pay-per-view in terms of the name, and the lineup was not the best, to be honest. Everyone worked hard, God bless them. I thought overall it was a fine show, but this was something that probably didn't really need to happen, or they could have put a little more oomph behind it, but since it is the show before All In, they probably didn't want to blow their load too early. That being said, the whole thing of MJF and Omega probably supposed to be the main event of this show, and for whatever reason, MJF couldn't do the show or didn't want to do the show. It's still kind of unclear what the whole reasoning for moving that match up from this one of Redemption to Beach Break is still a question mark. Maybe it will come out eventually, but I will say if this show had Kenny and MJF in the main event and it was kind of a one-match card in terms of something that everyone really cared about and was really hyped for, I think the vibe for the show going in and also coming out would be a whole lot different. But that's not the card that they presented. So let's just go over the pre-show real quick. Didn't really watch it, joined in like 15 minutes before the show started, but by that point, the match of the Conglomeration defeating the Lethal Twist was pretty much over. This was for the trios titles, and the Conglomeration retained. Early in the pre-show, they did do a ceremony for the Rougeau brothers, or the Rougeau family, since they were in Montreal. I didn't see much of it. I just kind of saw like a little snippet here and there. But, AEW is very good at kind of honoring wrestling history, even if it's not their history. So shout out to the Rougeaus and shout out to AEW for doing this, even though it was just on the pre-show. But, Montreal wrestling history I don't think gets talked about too much because everyone's going to talk about, the Hearts over in Calgary and maybe Toronto for the WrestleManias and stuff like that. But Montreal is kind of one of those towns that I think gets a little bit overlooked in terms of Canadian wrestling history. I know I'm the Canadian story and I'm supposed to hate Canada and all that stuff, but I'll be nice to them for this one day. We started off with the 6-way ladder match to determine the number one contender for the AEW International Championship. They did kind of the gimmick that they've done in the past where they kind of start off, they didn't start the match off technically. They were just doing entrances for the match, and then it bled into the pay-per-view proper. This was El Clone Commander, Nick Wayne, The Beast Mortis, Jack Perry, and Speedball Mike Bailey all fighting over for a contract. This went 19 minutes and 40 seconds. And by golly, they shoved a lot of shit in that 19 minutes and 40 seconds. They just did spot after spot after spot. A lot of it was very impressive. A lot of it seemed kind of dangerous, but they did a whole bunch of stuff. And at the end of the day, the hometown boy, Mike Bailey, did get the win, so he would face the winner of Kyle Fletcher and Bandido, but we'll get to that once it happens. Match was perfectly fine. It was, high energy, a lot of spots for the crowd to kind of get into. But the match itself, the stake involved, the people kind of involved, no one really cared too much about it, to be honest. Like, yes, the crowd was behind Speedball because he was a Canadian and everything like that, but kind of outside of that, I didn't think the match really meant much and didn't really feel like a big deal. Then we got the Young Bucks taking on the Death Riders of Jon Moxley and Will Ospreay in just a straight-up tag team match. This one also went 19 minutes and 40 seconds. according to Wikipedia. Obviously, these times can all be slightly off, but they told the story of Nick Jackson having some sort of concussion or some sort of head injury. So he was selling that very early on in the match, and he was kind of, dazed and wobbly and kind of not all there. And Will was kind of showing some compassion towards him, but Jon Moxley was telling him, don't do that. You got to go for the kill. You got to, go after him, get the win. He's been trying to get that killer instinct out of Will Ospreay for quite some time, prepping him for his main event match at Wembley. And, Will kind of hesitated, but then he didn't hesitate. Then he went after Nick. And, I get the story they're telling. They've told the story for a few months now, and it culminated with, Ospreay winning the Owen Hart tournament. But at the end of the day, I don't like them selling, concussions or neck injuries because, if you listen to my pay-per-view recaps and just kind of my wrestling takes in general when it comes to like the Bryan Danielson stuff, and Will Ospreay is guilty of this too, selling the neck and trying to make like this like a legit injury, one, takes you out of the match, whether you think it's real or you aren't buying anything, it's bullshit. So I think on whichever spot you fall on for the match in terms of like your believability, I just don't think it works, and I don't think it's productive for a wrestling match. Like, it's one thing for someone to like, hurt a knee or hurt an arm or something, or a shoulder, or sell a back, but just like something as serious as a head or neck injury, I just feel like they're going for like the wrong type of heat or the wrong type of kind of psychology there. And it just kind of takes you out of the moment and takes you out of the match. Because if this was legit, like if someone legitimately had like a concussion, you would think that, like, let's just think, if this was a real life concussion, they would not let Nick Jackson continue that match. But since he did continue the match, it's clearly a work and it's clearly all fake, and it kind of doesn't make you believe anything that's going on. So, I didn't like that. I think, once again, you can tell the exact same story, but just, Matt Jackson has had a back injury for like 15 years. Like, why couldn't you just do like Matt really selling his back and just like he could barely stand, and he can't get up, and he's trying to do like a super kick, but he collapsed and like everything like that. And Will is, showing some sympathy, but Moxley's telling him you can't do that. Like, you're telling the exact same story, but it's just not as fake, I would say. And clearly they see it differently because Will Ospreay likes to do this all the time. But at the end of the day, the Young Bucks, shocker, the tag team actually got the win in a tag team match by pinning Jon Moxley. They hit him with a few super kicks, hit him with some BTE triggers, and got the win that way. So a little bit of dissension between Moxley and Ospreay. This did bleed into a segment later on in the show. They did an interview with Ospreay and Moxley kind of, continuing on the fact that you got to show no remorse. You got to go for the kill. You can't be complacent. You can't show any empathy. You got to, if you want to be a champion, you want to be a dog, you can't be doing stuff like that. And then that led all the way into the main event segment. We'll talk at the very, very end, but that was definitely kind of the main story throughout the entirety of the show that they weaved through. Next up, we had the International Championship between Bandido and Kyle Fletcher. This was also kind of the theme of the match, where you knew this was going to be really good, and it was. It, worked very, very well. Great spots. I thought athletically was fantastic. Maybe, if you're just kind of grading it on the in-ring, I would say it was probably the best match of the night. This one did go 26 minutes and 20 seconds. Looking back, I think you could have shaved at least 5 minutes off of it if we're going to keep all these matches. But at the end of the day, Kyle Fletcher got the win, and he retains. And like I said, it was a really good match, but there was really no question what the finish would be. And it's kind of hard to really get behind Bandido. And there wasn't really like a moment, I thought, where they hit that crescendo where the crowd was really behind Bandido. You can kind of talk yourself into Bandido getting the win here. But yeah, it was a really good match, but just there was really no drama involved in any of it. Then we had the double chain tag team match. This was between the Dogs, David Finlay and Clark Connor, taking on the Bang Bang Gang, Jay White and Juice Robinson. This one also went 19 minutes, just 5 seconds, not 40 seconds like the other two matches. And it was, perfectly fine. There was, some spots, tying the chains up and getting some weird angles and fighting over leverage and things like that. And the tag team of David Finlay and Clark Connors, which are, they're more of a tag team than Juice Robinson and Jay White are, even though they have had their matches, like that absolute, I'll say it, banger of a match they had against FTR all those years ago now at this point. So Dogs, get the win. Makes sense to continue on with the feud. They pinned Juice Robinson to continue it. So, match was fine for what it was, but it did make sense for them to win to then kind of continue, whether Gabe King could get this visa situation figured out and he can kind of join the team and they can do some sort of like either 6-man or 8-man, 10-man with everyone kind of from the Bang Bang gang involved. But yeah, this was perfectly fine. Then we had the AEW TBS Championship match between Hikaru Shida defending against Maya World. Maya coming off of the really good match he had against Mercedes Moné in the Owen Hart final. She's been getting a bit of a push since then. And the push continues as she beat Hikaru Shida in 16 minutes and 30 seconds to win the championship. And this match it wasn't a struggle, but the crowd there was no heat behind it. I thought the crowd was kind of dead for a majority of it. That's kind of the same with the match she had against Mercedes. Like, the crowd was not really into the match for a majority of it, but then, they kind of got behind Maya at the end because I thought they told a really good story, and I thought they kind of culminated quite nicely. This one didn't exactly do that. Maya ended up just winning, I believe, with a cradle. So yeah, she just kind of won out of nowhere with a leverage pin. So it didn't really have that, comeback, fire up, hit her big move, and hit that, definitive stamp to get the win over Shida. She just kind of like, pulled it out of her ass and got the shocking win over Shida for them to probably run it back, either on television or maybe all the way till All In. Match was okay. It wasn't anything spectacular. Maybe a little bit of clunkiness here and there, but this one didn't need to go 16 minutes again, so it probably could have shaved like 5 minutes off of that. Probably also could have shaved like 5 minutes off the Dogs, and Bang Banging, that one went 19 minutes. I think I said that already, but yeah, that one could have went like 12 minutes, I would say. If you had to have the match at all, I probably would have said, like, yes, it's a gimmick match, but I think you could have, have that be like a nice gimmick match on a Dynamite or on a Collision, like make Collision mean something, and have some of those matches on there. Next up, we did have the World Tag Team Championships with Cope and Christian taking on the Death Riders. This one being the incarnation of Claudio Castagnoli and Pac. This one went 18 minutes 35 seconds. This was pretty straightforward. Being in Canada, Cope and Cage are going to be really, really over, and the Death Riders just kind of put the heat on the veteran baby faces for a majority of the match. The faces, make the comeback, get the win. It was just, it was fine. This was definitely just kind of a match that was a filler between, their feud with FTR and then now their feud with the Young Bucks, as the Young Bucks came out after the match to shake their hands and to challenge them, and they even showed up the graphic of Young Bucks taking on Cope and Cage at All In for the tag titles. Still a month left for FTR to maybe insert themselves into this, and also maybe insert a ladder, table, and chair stipulation, possibly, because it can't be tables, ladders, and chairs. So maybe they flip the order of the instruments around to maybe get around some copyrights, and they can still do the TLC. Maybe they call it LCT, I don't know. But they've been teasing the Young Bucks and Cope and Cage for quite some time, so not shocking that they went to it right after the match, but it was interesting that they kind of just pivoted right afterwards. But Claudio and Pac, no real doubt that they were going to win this, that Cope and Cage were going to win that match. It was pretty straightforward. Could have just been a TV or like your typical kind of elevated, I would say like an elevated health show type, because, let the Canadians win in Canada. Then we got the no-holds-barred match between the Painmaker, Chris Jericho, and Tommaso Ciampa. This one went 23 minutes. This one definitely did not need to go 23 minutes. This one could have went like 10 to 12 minutes, just kind of get in, get out, do a lot of your spots and all that other good fun stuff and just get out of there. Crowd, had a ball. Once again, another Canadian getting a win on Canada soil. So, the crowd was behind Jericho. They were, playing along. They were chanting for stuff, and they were, there's some silly elements to this, as there always are kind of in these type of AEW quote-unquote hardcore matches, you always kind of got to get your laugh spots in, and they had a Youpie, or like a little stuffed Youpie, which is the mascot for the NHL Montreal Canadiens team. He's like this little orange gremlin looking thing, so he was a part of the match, just the toy, not the actual, big mascot, but he was kind of over during the entirety of the match. There was a lot of blood, there was glass, there was sand, there was thumbtacks, there was thumbtacks on pucks. What else? And yes, they did bring back the drill. The finish of the match was, Ciampa took out a knee elbow pad filled with or covered in thumbtacks. That got discarded, so it was Chekhov's elbow pad for a long time, and then Jericho finds it, uses it with the Judas effect, and then he takes a drill, and he then proceeds to shove the drill bit into Tommaso Ciampa's head, but clearly, it's a gimmick, so he's not going to, pierce a hole through his head, but everyone's hands are in the certain spot, and the camera's, very far away, and Ciampa apparently taps out or gives up. It was very weird and awkward because it didn't lead to a pinfall, led to a submission, and then just Jericho puts the thing in his head for a couple seconds, and Tommaso Ciampa gives up. So then the match is over, and that was that. Kind of a weird finish, I would say. Once again, going back to kind of the believability thing, no one actually believes that Chris Jericho is going to impale Tommaso Ciampa with a drill. So I think even if you're going to tease it and not do it, or tease it and do it, it still comes across as phony and really fake and over the top. And this is unfortunately, I think, one of the downsides of AEW is they just have these quote unquote creative things they want to do, never been done before type spots. And just because they've never been done before doesn't mean they should be done, because at the end of the day, I think they're still stupid. And that's what I feel with the drill. But Jericho gets the win, moves on, kind of as we talked about on the Bullet Cast. Loses kind of the build-up matches, but then at the end he wins the final one, so he's able to kind of get his win back, keep his heat a little bit, but still kind of puts over the other talent for a majority of the feud. I don't know where Jericho goes from here if you're kind of trying to book a match for him at Wembley. I mean, nothing really jumps out because Tommaso Ciampa is not really linked with anybody, so I would assume they're probably going to do something on Dynamite, and someone interrupts him or attacks him, and that's going to kind of set on the fast track. Maybe some sort of tag match. I mean, possibly Mick Foley is going to wrestle at Wembley, so maybe Jericho kind of puts himself in that match as well. Just kind of have a lot of legends on one side and the conglomeration or whoever on their side going up against a big old gaggle of heels, whether it's the Don Callis family or somebody else for them to attack. So keep an eye out. This one was one of the few kind of feuds that have a bow tied around it, so they're not going to run it back at All In, I would assume. Looks like they're probably going to go in different directions, and hopefully Ciampa lands on his feet and can do something else, because I think Ciampa's been pretty good in AEW. He's not been, a difference maker. He's not going to be in the main event scene by any means, but I think he's been doing good work on the mid to low mid card, and hopefully he can continue to do some good work on, I would say, primarily Collision. Then this was kind of the forgotten match for myself. We had Andrade taking on Mark Davis for Davis's AEW National Championship. Completely forgot that this match was taking place. I was like, oh yeah, we only got 2 matches left, but no, this one popped up out of nowhere for me. And this one goes 16 minutes, 15 seconds. Match was good. Crowd, was behind Andrade, so I think the heat was there for this one. But I thought this match didn't need to be on here. This, once again, could have been a Dynamite main event, or a Dynamite kind of top of the hour, main eventing the first hour, going to the second hour type of match to make it kind of a loaded show. But no, this is on the pay-per-view, and Andrade gets the win and wins his first ever AEW championship in AEW. That's where you win AEW championships. Just like when I was watching the pay-per-view pre-show, and Jeff Jarrett was like, oh yeah, nobody does an AEW pay-per-view like us. Perfectly said, Jeff. No one does AEW pay-per-views like AEW. But yeah, Andrade gets the win. Maybe he goes after, or someone else from the Don Callis family goes after him, but Mark Davis is kind of like the third man in the Don Callis family, and it looks as though Kyle Fletcher and Okada are going to be kind of tied up in their own little feud with I got this. Tanosuke Takeshita. Sorry, I was making it double T. It was KT. Konosuke Takeshita. There we go. A lot easier to say that. So I don't know where Andrade kind of goes from here. Maybe they run it back with Mark Davis, or they go in a different direction. But match was good. I think Mark Davis has been a pleasant surprise in the Don Callis family, but similar to like Tommaso Ciampa, he's not going to get any kind of higher than this. And Andrade once again kind of unfortunately put in this kind of late spot on the card where the crowd likes him and is into the match, but it's just so late that they're not have their full-blown energy, and they know there's still some stuff to come, because that's kind of what happened when I went to the show Revolution, when it was Andrade against Bandido. That was one of the matches I was really excited to see, but they put it in the kind of semi-main, like I think it was literally the second to last match, and you knew you still had that big MJF Hangman match coming up. So crowd was energized, the crowd was into it, but they weren't energized for it, because they knew they still had probably like a 45-minute match to go after that, so they didn't want to kind of go too hard in the paint. But Andrade has been building himself up. He's been getting over, and he finally gets a championship, even though everyone gets a championship in AEW, as you can see on this card. Was it 10 matches in total? I think 7 of them were for title matches. So there you go. Penultimate match, semi-main event, the AEW Women's Championship. Tekla defending against Willow Nightingale. This one goes 17 minutes and 10 seconds, and Willow is your new AEW World Champion. Match was fine. Once again, I thought the crowd was kind of lackadaisical for this one. They weren't really into it. Like they like Willow, but they also kind of like Tekla. I think I'm kind of like in the similar boat as the crowd is. Like, whoever wins this match is probably going to go on to face Mercedes at All In. And, we've kind of been there, done that with Willow and Mercedes, but there's also, a history there, so they can kind of, lean back on that, and they can kind of tell that story. But I thought Tekla's had a pretty good year, pretty productive as the NXT, as the AEW champion. So it's almost kind of like a, let her finish the run out and have her, be one of the big matches at Wembley against Mercedes. Maybe the story is kind of more there for Willow, but I just thought maybe the match / Tekla deserves to be in that spot a little bit more than Willow, just because of what she's done this year. But evidently Tony Khan decided to go in the opposite direction and chose Willow and put the title on her. We'll wait and see what they do on that front. I mean, Willow, clear babyface. Mercedes still, I think, just kind of like a murky question mark. I mean, she hasn't really been on television that much to really cement what her character is. But I think her character is just kind of like full of herself and loves winning titles and loves to prance around and dance and dress in fancy stuff. And if you like that, good. If you don't like that, who cares? So, yeah. So that's it. They did have Mercedes up in the skybox watching on, so they didn't do like a full-blown face-to-face, but they ran the graphic for Willow and Mercedes at All In. And that match, once again, should be fine. Should be really good, honestly. I think Mercedes, she doesn't wrestle all that often, but when she does wrestle, she does bring it. And I think the Willow match should be really good, as long as they're not kind of like put in a spot where the crowd's dead. And, yeah. Then we get the main event, Kenny Omega defending against Kevin Knight for the World Championship. And this match was a solid match, but let's be honest, the finish was never in doubt. They're not going to have Kevin Knight win the title against Kenny Omega in Canada, a month away from All In, against Will Ospreay, and it was never going to happen. And the crowd, I'm not saying like the crowd knew that and they were like, dead because of it, but the crowd was not like as hot as you'd expect kind of a Canadian crowd to be in a Kenny Omega main event title match. Now, if this was Kenny Omega and MJF, I think they would have been really hot for this, and they would have been all in on, no pun intended, Kenny Omega winning that championship from MJF. But whatever reason the reason is, that did not happen, and so we kind of get Kenny Omega defending, kind of a unfortunate throwaway type of defense here against Kevin Knight. No disrespect to Kevin Knight. I think he is super talented in the ring. I still think he needs to kind of find his lane in terms of like his character and his voice. And I think that's another reason why the match didn't really click that much, because, Kevin just got this push to, be the singles guy and be like a pretty big deal. And I unfortunately just completely forgot about him when I was talking about the Don Callis family. Clearly Kevin Knight is number 3, at a, maybe even number 2 beside, behind Kyle Fletcher, if, maybe over Okada, just because Okada's kind of where he is. And I don't think he's going to be much more than that, unfortunately. But, Kevin Knight, I think they're still trying to build him up, and he's only been in this spot for like, what, 2-3 months now, whenever Double or Nothing was in May. So yeah, so 2 months. And he's done fine, but he hasn't like blown me away in terms of what he's been doing to like really question if he throw all the all-in plans out the window and just go with Kevin Knight against Will Ospreay. So unfortunate circumstances, but I thought they did perfectly fine for what they were. They told the story of kind of Kenny trying to pull something out of Kevin, kind of treating him less than, and kind of, taking him lightly, and Kevin kind of fired up. But the psychology of Kevin being the heel in that situation doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because you would probably, why would Kenny be taking this guy lightly? Why didn't he just finish him off, win the match, yada, yada. But, it is what it is. But Kenny, hits him one week angel, bam, splat, wins the match in 25 minutes. Could have been a little shorter, but I think that's kind of nitpicking. 25 minutes for an AEW main event. Not going to complain, especially I was wishing they weren't going to go 30 plus minutes. They did not. They kind of contained themselves on that front. But the main event as a whole, I think, went about 35 minutes, because then we got a big old angle afterwards with the Young Bucks coming out. The Death Riders beat them up. Will Ospreay comes in to make the save after Claudio was gonna Pillmanize Kenny Omega's neck with a chair. Omega or Ospreay, clears them up, beats everybody up, blah, 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 goes after, then Moxley comes in, and he's like, okay, it's fine. And he takes out the dreaded plastic bag. And if you guys know, I hate this thing, going back to, it's not real, it's fake, it takes you out of the moment if it is real, and if it takes you out of the moment because you think it's so fake. Moxley gives the bag to Ospreay. Ospreay, looks around, shaking his fist, kind of, will he, won't he? And he ends up, won't he? He tears the bag up, and then he goes and attacks Moxley, and seemingly turns his back on the Death Riders. There was no like big old beatdown on Ospreay. Moxley kind of took it on the chin, kind of was like, okay, you made your choice, you made your bed, and now you're going to have to lay in it eventually, but they didn't go after him right there. Moxley kind of gathered the boys, and they all left, and Ospreay took the title, goes to hand it to Omega. Omega did have the remnants of the plastic bag in his hand, and kind of like looking around and seeing like what the hell just happened. He takes the title from Ospreay. They celebrate together. They pose. They have the match graphic of Kenny and Ospreay at Wembley in the background, and they go to a shot of Ospreay going up on the top turnbuckle to look at the crowd and say thank you. And right when that happens, Omega puts him in the one wing angel, puts him on his shoulders, plants him down on the mat, and so Ospreay is left laying as the crowd boos / is ambivalent, doesn't really know how to react, because once again, they are in Canada, they're going to love Kenny Omega. And the Young Bucks kind of look kind of weird at Kenny. Kenny kind of, says, he was going to do this to me, so I got to get him before he gets me, stuff like that. It wasn't super audible, but that's just kind of what I read into what they were trying to tell the story about. And clearly they're going to do some promos. They might do kind of their post pay-per-view, promo angle that they typically do on the first Dynamite afterwards. And I wonder, I don't think they're going to turn Kenny heel, because they kind of told the story before when he won the title, that he didn't like who he was when he had the title the last time, unless they're going to tell the story of whatever thing comes over Kenny when he holds that championship. When he has that title, he's like, becomes a different guy. But I think they are going to tell the story of kind of Kenny not trusting Ospreay and not trusting, his association with Moxley, kind of leading to why he attacked him, because if I didn't do it, you were going to do it. So I don't think they're going to do, full-blown heel turn. I think they'll just kind of explain themselves. They'll, Ospreay and Omega aren't going to like each other. They're not going to be buddy-buddy. It's going to be, Killer Instinct, the wrestling god against the assassin, and they're going to build that up. Hopefully, Moxley kind of steps away for now, and maybe he'll do a promo here and there, but he's not going to get physically involved. Not saying they're going to make it a triple threat match by any means, but just kind of have the Death Rider step away, and then maybe once Ospreay gets the win, allegedly, if he wins against Omega, then you kind of do that Moxley and Ospreay match, probably at All Out, whenever that is, probably in a week or two. I don't know how quick the turnaround from All In to All Out is, but that's seems to be the plan, at least from my vantage point. I mean, I think they were always going to do a Moxley Ospreay match, but they're definitely kind of laying the foundation for it being a, face heel dynamic instead of the mentor mentee dynamic. And there still is going to be that type of dynamic in the match or in the storyline before that. But that was AEW Redemption. Like I said, I thought it was kind of a lackluster card going into it, and it was perfectly fine for an AEW pay-per-view. It didn't kind of, raise to that next level that they have in the past. So, we give letter grades out here on the Bulletcast, and if we're going to give this a grade, and this is definitely kind of like an AEW curve grade, because, overall the show is still good. There's nothing terrible and, atrocious on the show, but I would probably say this was a C- AEW show. It was perfectly fine, but nothing I'm going to really remember kind of at the end of the year when we're doing best of stuff. I didn't really pick a best match of the show. If I were to pick one, maybe I do Fletcher and Bandido. I think that'd probably be the pick. I would go for that one, but let me know who you'd pick, what you thought of the show, if you did watch it, if you didn't watch it. We do have SummerSlam coming up next week, so we got back-to-back pay-per-views. Excited to talk about all that, ready to preview it on the Bulletcast and Curveballs and Chair Shots, whichever feed you are listening to this on. Thank you very much. Highly appreciate it. If you want to follow us, Bulletcast, the Bulletcast on Twitter and Instagram, Curveballs and CS for us over at the Curveballs and Chair Shots with the sports and the wrestling on Twitter and Instagram. And, you know where to find us. Dropping episodes every weekend on both sides. So until next time, I've been Brandon Tanguma. Love you all. Big hugs, tiny kisses. Goodbye, good night, and bang.